Good morning and welcome to the work session of the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee. We have two items today, I just want to alert my colleagues that I do have a hard stop at 11:30 a.m., but I think that's plenty of time for us to be able to dispose of these two items. Item number one is our spending affordability guidelines for the FY23 operating budget. I know that we are joined for this session by Mr. Mullen of the Office of Management and Budget and Mr. David Platt, Department of Finance. As we all are aware, the Council is required by law to specify the following when adopting the spending affordability guidelines for the operating budget. Number one, a ceiling of the funding from ad valorem real property tax revenues. Number two, a ceiling on the aggregate operating budget, also referred to as AOB. And number three, separate budget allocations for the following agencies: county government, Montgomery County Public Schools, Montgomery College, Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission, also debt service, which is not an agency, but the size of it feels like an agency, and current revenue funding of capital projects. Please note the county law specifies that for setting the spending affordability guidelines for the operating budget, the council should consider, among other relevant factors, the condition of the economy, the level of economic activity in the county, trends in personal income, and the impact of economic population growth on projected revenues. And to frame the conversation today, as this committee has heard time and time again, we will review the current economic conditions as it considers appropriate affordability guidelines for the FY23 operating budget. Just like all the recent discussions that we had about the capital budget bond guidelines, it is about affordability and not about need. And these decisions are an important part of the county's fiscal policies, so we can ensure that the county's budget is positioned to meet the county's current and future needs, especially as the executive prepares the recommended budget that we will receive in March. At this point, I'm going to ask Mr. Smith, our legislative analyst, to walk us through first the conditions of the economy, then the decision points at which we will pause and have a discussion and take a vote. And then, of course, we will base that on his recommendations for the committee, unless there are other thoughts or other proposals by my colleagues. So with that, let me turn it over to Mr. Jean, and if there's anybody else that needs to be introduced and recognized, please do so as well. Mr. Jean Smith, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Navarro. As always, it's the partnership between Finance, OMB, and Council staff as we work on fiscal matters, budget. So as you already noted, we're joined by our colleagues. I think we're also joined by Mr. Waters and from OMB and Mr. Hetman from Finance, just as part of the conversation. As you noted, I'll quickly touch on a couple of background items related to spending affordability guidelines. The council must set these by the second Tuesday of February, so that's February 8th this year. And so the recommendations that the GO committee sends out today will be put in the council staff report for Tuesday and acted upon. And you already listed the three decision points before the committee today. Council staff notes that the only one that has a limitation or puts a threshold down is the number two, which is the aggregate operating budget. Whatever the council approves is the ceiling for the aggregate operating budget becomes the 7-vote threshold in May for the final operating budget. The other two items do not have the same thresholds as that one. So as you asked, I'll go quickly through the conditions of the economy and other information as we always do to prepare this conversation. As already everyone knows, we've been through a pandemic for the last 20 plus months. And so we've seen a lot of shifts in the economy. And what council staff notes is that compared to last year, the unemployment rate has decreased. That's great news, but the unemployment rate still remains below the pre-pandemic level. And that will be one of the themes throughout this overview. We've seen a lot of growth, we've seen a lot of movement, but a lot of our indicators still remain below pre-pandemic levels for the county and for the region. In addition, the total number of payroll jobs, people that work here, not necessarily live here, but people that work in the county, in both the county and the region is still lower than it was pre-pandemic, but it has increased significantly since 2020. And all of this information is comparing 2020 to 2021 or So in addition, the major indicator for the county's income tax revenues, resident employment, has decreased compared to previous indicators, and that again is linked to the county's income taxes primarily, and we'll keep watching that. In terms of the level of economic activity, well known, but the inflation rate is higher or greater than it was previously. And the information we have is just based on the most recent data, but the inflation rate has remained up. And based on that, a lot of the payroll increases that we've seen, some of that has been negated for those individuals as inflation has reduced some of that payroll increase. In addition, the office market continues to experience some increases in vacancy rates, even though the rents are up, although not in the packets. Council staff notes that after the Omicron variant, several larger businesses around the country have noted a continued remote work protocol, and that obviously could play out into the county's office market through 2022, depending on how businesses in the county continue to decide to interact with the future variants or the current pandemic. Some good news, the county's home sales have significantly increased in 2021. Both the value of the homes, the median value was increased, as well as the total number of sales. And we've discussed this up previously for the capital budget guidelines, as well as the fiscal plan update, where we've seen our recordation taxes and transfer taxes at a higher level than we were estimating. Moving along to some trends in personal income, the salary and personal income, as I've already said, is experienced strong increases in this year in the county, although some of that has been negated by the increased inflation and cost. But finance continues to estimate that these increases will remain, although they will level off through the next 6 years. And then finally, some other relevant factors before we move on to some of the decision points. The Fed has already indicated they plan to raise interest rates this year. When I wrote this staff report early in January, they had signaled 3. The last I've heard, it could be even greater, 4 or 5. Certainly, increases to interest rate will shift some things in the markets, as well as overall for mortgage rates and just the cost, and hopefully will also slow down inflation as the anticipated result of that action. And then finally, the state of Maryland has also signaled they've seen strong growth in revenues and have a surplus, and so we've also discussed that, but that is also part of the context of the economy and overall picture that the county is in. So I will go ahead and move on to the decision points. That's some of the background. There's more information in my staff report from pages 2 to 4, but that is the overview of kind of where we sit as a county in the region and in the state. And so the first decision. Just 1 second.
I just want to check with my colleagues to see if there are any questions regarding this background of snapshot of the economic conditions. Okay, you can proceed.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. So the first decision is the ceiling on the property tax rate. Property tax revenue for the fiscal 23 operating budget. As noted in the staff report, this is merely a signal. It doesn't restrict the council's decisions as it considers the operating budget. Certainly the charter limitation will still be in effect. And we've talked previously, but that limit has changed in the November 2020 general election. But nonetheless, the calculation can still be derived in terms of the total revenues. And so what council staff is recommending, as always, is that the council for this ceiling set the charter limit, which was in the fiscal December 2021 fiscal plan update, and totals $1,963.2 million. And that is the charter limit for 23. And so that's what council staff recommends for this one.
Okay, any comments, questions from my colleagues, discussion? Okay, without objection, we will adopt your recommendation, Mr. Smith.
Very good. The next decision point is the ceiling on the aggregate operating budget. As I noted previously, the decision by the council on this one will set the 7-vote threshold for the operating budget in May of 2022. As always in the county code, there's no specific way that this gets set and how it's determined. And as on table 1 on page 5, council staff has shown some of the history and the ways that the council has set this rate there. And as always, have prepared 4 different options before the committee to help set the ceiling. The first option is 0% growth, keep the aggregate operating budget the same as fiscal 22. And this is what the council decided last year for fiscal 22's aggregate operating budget based on the economic data at the time. Option number 2 is to use the increase in county agencies that OMB and Finance estimated in the December 2021 fiscal plan update. This is a 4.49% increase over fiscal 22's aggregate operating budget. Option number 3 is to use the inflation rate that Finance is estimated for 2021, which is 4.16% increase. And then option number 4 is to use half of the personal income growth in 2021 as estimated by Finance was a 2.31% increase. Council staff has recommended the option number 4, a 2.31% increase. Given the context of the economy, which both has grown but not evenly, and given the context of us as a county still trying to wade our way through the pandemic, council staff felt like a slightly more conservative approach than just going for the 4.1%, 6% increase or the 4.49% increase seemed warranted here. And so the recommendation is to increase this aggregate operating budget for fiscal 23 by 2.31%, which totals $5,260.5 million.
Okay, questions from my colleagues? Comments? Okay, so without objection, we will adopt that recommendation.
And then the final series of decisions are related to how that aggregate operating budget is parsed out to the items that Ms. Navarro mentioned at the very beginning. As always, I'll just quickly note that these agency allocations are not final. They're merely illustrative of how this gets allocated with the aggregate operating budget that was just recommended. Certainly as the executive puts together his recommended budget, and as the council reviews the recommended budget, there's a lot of information that may change that will ultimately decide how the agency allocations will work out in the final budget. One last thing is that the county code doesn't have any limit requirements for the council based on these allocations, but agencies that exceed these allocations will need to send a memo to note how they would meet the allocations if their recommendation is greater than the council's recommendations. So I will go through each item, pause briefly as Ms. Navarro asked. So the first one is debt service. Obviously, our fixed costs are an important fiscal policy issue to continue to manage and to note. And so the recommendation based on the December 2021 fiscal plan is $442.4 million for this allocation. That includes both county and parks debt. And that is the recommendation for debt service for the allocations in the SAC.
Okay, I see thumbs up. So without objection, we will accept that recommendation.
Thank you. Moving along, current revenue in the capital budget is also a way to keep debt costs lower. But it is a draw on the current funds in the general fund for other operating budget expenses. And so there's two main items that we note in our in the council's operating budget guidelines, which is both current revenue and pay-go. And so for current revenue, council staff has used again the December 2021 fiscal plan update of $106.8 million. And for pay-go, same December 2021 fiscal plan update of $33.9 million for both of these.
All right, any discussion? No, I think that we are good with that without objection.
Almost there, a couple more points. The next item we note in the resolution is the retiree health insurance pre-funding. And again, I've used the 2021 December fiscal plan update that OMB has estimated that to be $81.9 million for fiscal 23. And so that's the recommendation for this line item.
Okay, without objection, yes.
And then finally, the agency allocations. For MCPS and Montgomery College, council staff has recommended both the amounts that the OMB estimated in the December 2021 fiscal plan update based on MOE and what the county needs to contribute and growth there. Also for the college, the reason it's slightly lower than the fiscal 22 approved is there is no assumption of fund balance rollover, but certainly as always, when the council gets the executive's recommendation, both of these agencies will be reviewed through that lens. But this keeps them the same as what we saw in this December fiscal 2021 fiscal plan update.
Okay, I see nodding as well. I think that without objection, we will adopt that recommendation to stay at maintenance of effort.
And then the last two are the county government and parks and planning, and that is just based on their pro rata portion of what they have in fiscal 22 And again, let me do this. So for the sake of those watching at home, since they may not follow the packet, I'll go back to MCPS, the college, and Montgomery County government and Parks and Planning and read all of those out loud. So for MCPS, the amount is $2,558.4 million. For Montgomery County College, it's $193.6 million. For the county government, it's $1,697.3 million. And then for Parks and Planning, it's $146.2 million. And so just again, for clarity, those are the amounts that will be in the resolution, and that is what council staff recommends.
Okay, I think without objection, we will also accept that recommendation for the rest of the county government. With that, is that all we need to do? We're done with this piece, yes?
Yes, we are.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Smith, really appreciate it. Okay. Now we're on to item number 2, and this is expedited Bill 45-21, elections, public campaign financing restrictions. I know in my list, I have it here that we will be joined by Mr. Jerry Demarinis, who is the Director of the Division of Candidacy and Campaign Finance from the Maryland State Board of Elections, Ms. Kathleen Boucher, who's the Deputy Director of the Office of Intergovernmental Relations for the county, Mr. Ed Lantner, Chief Government Operations Division, Office of the County Attorney. And also we, I believe, have from the administration, Mr. David Crow, who's the Acting Controller, Department of Finance. We also have invited Mr. David School, Chair of the Montgomery County Public Finance Commission, and Mr. Bill Ewan, member of the commission. We also joined by the lead sponsors of the bill, Councilmembers Evan Glass, Councilmember Sidney Katz, who is, of course, a member of this committee. We welcome you, and Councilmember Reamer as well. This bill, which is sponsored by the lead sponsors, Councilor Vice President Glass, Katz, Councilmember Reamer, and also Council Vice President Albornoz, and co-sponsors, Councilmembers Navarro, myself, and Rice. And then Council President Hucker was introduced. A lot of different former and current was introduced on November 16, 2021. And a public hearing took place on December 7th, 2021. The bill would amend the county's public campaign finance law to permit certain limited in-kind donations equivalent to $10,000 or less from state or county central committees to publicly financed candidates. The purpose of the bill is to permit the central committees to display or distribute the literature of publicly financed candidates under certain conditions. Currently, the central committees are precluded from displaying or distributing literature for public finance candidates, but they can and do display literature for traditionally financed candidates. Under current county law, a publicly financed candidate must not accept a private contribution from any group or organization, including a political action committee, a corporation, a labor organization, or a state or local central committee of a political party. This bill would carve out a limited exception to this prohibition for an in-kind contribution equal to or less than $10,000 from a state or a Montgomery County Central Committee of a political party. And so, as I said earlier, this would permit a central committee to display or distribute a publicly financed candidate's literature or otherwise make a limited in-kind contribution to publicly financed candidate as long as the contribution does not exceed $10,000 in value. The bill would also prevent publicly financed candidates from fundraising for central committees. State law generally authorizes the county to create a public campaign finance system and to set eligibility and parameters of the program within certain limitations. Expedited Bill 45-21 would be consistent with the limitations set forth in state law. Also, it's important to note that on December 16, 2021, the Maryland State Board of Elections approved proposed regulations regarding the same subject matter as Expedited Bill 45-21. Subsequently, the proposed regulations are similar to Expedited Bill 45-21. Like the bill, these proposed regulations would permit in-kind contributions from central committees to publicly finance local candidates up to $10,000 per election. I do want to thank Mr. Demarinis for working collaboratively with our team and for being available to discuss this and other issues contained in the packet. I also want to personally thank the sponsors of this bill for strengthening the underlying values of public campaign financing. This committee took a bill that was introduced by then Councilmember Phil Andrews and worked really hard for a long time to produce an amended product that has set the tone for other jurisdictions. Public campaign financing plays an outsized role in our democracy. At a time when our democracy seems fragile, with threats to voting rights and the outsized influence of dark money, public campaign financing is an important safeguard. I am proud of this work and proud to serve with colleagues that understand these dynamics. So now I'm going to, turn it over to Councilmember Glass, who led the charge to add this particular and address this incredibly important issue. And then we'll turn it over to Ms. Wellens to walk us through the packet, et cetera, and we'll engage in a conversation. Also for colleagues, you can also raise your hand function as well if you need to flag. All right, Council Vice President Glass.
Well, thank you very much, Chair Navarro. I appreciate everybody being here today. And Chair Navarro, I appreciate your work during your council presidency in 2019 to update the public financing law. And that was an exercise to refine the program based on the lessons we had learned from the previous campaign. And, we here in Montgomery County are, leading this experiment in democracy, and it continues to need refinement. And so I appreciate the spirit in which we all come together to try and make our government and our democracy work better for everybody. And, as we updated the law in 2019, based on the information we had from that previous campaign, since then, we've had more information, which is really what the impetus of this legislation is. Specifically, there was a legal opinion in the summer of 2021 from one of the state political parties that prohibited central committees from coordinating with candidates who were participating in public financing. And let's be frank, the directive was not a mere prohibition. In my opinion, and in the opinion of many others, the directive was essentially a gag order denying central committees from mentioning a candidate in their emails or even allowing campaign literature on their tables at events. And I think we would all agree that that is not the intention of this law. And so I appreciate the co-leads, Councilmembers Katz, Albornoz, and Reamer, and the co-sponsors, you, Chair Navarro, Councilmembers Rice and Hucker, for helping to try to fix this and correct it so that candidates who are currently participating in public financing are not intentionally placed at a disadvantage. And I also just want to express my appreciation for Mr. Demarinis, who is doing yeoman's work statewide for taking time to deal with our issues here, but also recognizing, as Chair Navarro mentioned, that other jurisdictions in the county are emulating our work. And so this will have ripple effects in other jurisdictions. And so we once again are leading the way in refining this law. And then also thank you, Mr. Scull, for your work on the committee to make sure from the citizens' perspective that we all are good stewards of this program. So Madam Chair, I turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Council Vice President Glass. Thank you for that framing. It is so important to remind everyone how critical it is that when you take on something that is unprecedented, it's all about continuous improvement and learning, and that's what we have done. I think that it has been really, really gratifying to see how many people, how many candidates have opted to participate in this program, and the idea is that we have to make sure that it works fairly and in an equitable way, because if not, then it totally, dissuades people from participating. That is not the purpose. And so I do want to echo your comments, and again, also thank Mr. Scull and Mr. Ewing and all the members, because that piece, when we originally adopted the bill of creating this body, was so important for people to know that there would be a process through which the amount that needed to be in the fund would be decided, and it would be apolitical. I think that was really critical and very important. And it has served, as you said, as a template for other jurisdictions across the state. But again, I want to reiterate my gratitude to Mr. Demarinis and Mr. Crow, especially because they had to be the pioneers to address the myriad of issues and questions, et cetera, that continued to come. But they've done an incredible job, and I feel really good about where this is headed. I'll turn it over to Councilmember Reamer, who has his hand up also and is a co-lead sponsor, and then we'll engage in a discussion. Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you, Committee Chair Navarro. I just want to thank you and this committee for your work on this issue over the years. And as you just mentioned, including among your various improvements to the law has been the recommendation to create the committee. And I think that was brilliant. It really did produce a sense of outside and independent judgment and accountability and scrutiny. And I think that's really been helpful. And as has been said, I think, really the whole country is watching this county's implementation of this law. And it has been an example for other communities to follow. And it's very unusual. It's very precious. And it's also fragile. I mean, we shouldn't assume that the public will always support it. We have to make sure that we continue to protect its integrity and make sure we have growing support for it. So we have a shout out, of course, to Councilmember Andrews, who really took the lead to get the state legislation and then introduce the county legislation. And speaking as a candidate who's had the chance to run in the system, it is the greatest privilege that an elected official could have to be able to run for office. And there's so much public trust there. You're making public funds available for an office seeker is a very special thing. And it means that, again, we should be mindful about preserving public support for that. So that it can continue and we can continue, as this county is the home of Jamie Raskin, who is fighting for our democracy every day. We're leading in a different way at the local level on something that I think we know this country needs deeply, which is comprehensive campaign finance reform. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's see, Ms. Wellens, can you please walk us through the packet and the decision points, and then we'll pause and engage in a conversation and get through this as well. Wonderful. Thank you for putting together this extraordinarily important packet and some of your additional points that you make that I think that we can definitely discuss in future sessions, because I do think that as we learn more and as people participate in this program, I participated in 2018. I know that there was a lot of things that we all saw as pluses, and also things that we should improve, which is what we engaged in this very long process of obtaining feedback. There's always going to be, there are going to be things that are going to come up and are going to evolve, and I think that we should definitely think through all of that as well. So I want to thank you for also including some of these other additional areas that we could take up in later sessions.
Thank you so much, Chair Navarro, and thank you, council members, and good morning, everyone. The chair and Mr. Glass already and Mr. Reamer already thoroughly described the bill and its background and purpose. I'll just note that in the public hearing, as you can see in the packet, a number of prospective office holders who are interested in using public financing testified in support of the bill, indicating that it would improve equity between publicly financed candidates and traditionally financed candidates. We'll jump to issue number 1 in the staff packet, which is, I am on page 3 of the staff memorandum. And as you'll see here, Chair Navarro had mentioned how there are pending state regulations on the same subject matter, and they largely align with the Bill 4521. However, there is one provision that is not in the bill that the committee might wish to incorporate, and that is that the state regulation indicated that in terms of sources of funds that are used towards the permitted in-kind donations, that those contributions would have to be raised from permissible sources for that candidate within the reporting period for which the coordinated in-kind contribution was made. In order to incorporate that same premise into the pending bill, I would bring the committee's attention, actually jumping forward to the addendum of the staff packet, which is right after circle number 19. There is some potential text for the committee's consideration that it would clarify that the source of the in-kind contributions would derive from individual contributions that do not exceed the public contribution limits established under section 16-23 of the state law. So that would kind of ensure that all of the intents of the public finance law were being met under the bill. So that amendment is there for the committee's consideration. Happy to try to answer any questions. Thank you.
Councilmember Katz.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and good morning to all. And thank you all for being here. I know Mr. Demarius needed something else to do. I know he's not busy enough during these times of excitement. So it's always good to see you as well, Jared. Actually, my question, I'm in agreement with what Ms. Wellens just discussed, but I'd like to go back to page 2, if that's possible, of your packet. In the narrative, the first paragraph, it says that by creating this exception, a central committee would be permitted to display or distribute a publicly financed candidate's literature or otherwise make the limited in-kind contribution. Should that be and or to display and or distribute? I mean, we shouldn't have to choose displaying or distributing. It should be both. Am I correct in that?
You are correct, Mr. Katz, and the language of the bill would allow for that.
Okay, very good. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Madam Chair. I am in support of the suggested amendment.
All right. Any other thoughts or comments, especially regarding this particular amendment by our elites? Council Vice President Glass.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. I do have a question for Mr. Demarius regarding the intention of that language in the regulation. But just going back to Mr. Katz, Councilmember Katz's comment, because again, we're dealing with very specific language here that has been construed in a certain way, which is requiring this legislation and conversation. But with regard to the displaying of literature, does that also allow for electronic communication? I mean, emails, quite frankly, or any types of other ads or marketing?
I guess Jared Demarius, Director of Candidacy and Campaign Finance for Maryland State Board of Elections, for the record. Well, I mean, the way the regulations at the state level and the proposed amendment here just talks about in-kind contributions from the central committees. So it's, it's anything that is not basically monetary given to the campaign. So at that point there, what you described would be something that would be not monetary given to the campaign. So yes, that would be covered. So it's basically anything that you can think of that the central committee can provide to the campaign that has no value. If the central committee wanted to buy signs for your candidacy up to $10,000, that would be considered an in-kind contribution as well. So, I think, that's kind of the overall arching. It was hard to parse out what we wanted only to have lit drops and to do this, it's either an in-kind contribution or it's not. So sure. It's just kind of, that's why it's a general thing. And I think that's why the limit of $10,000 is important, because then that kind of caps it at, so you can't circumvent or run a shadow campaign through these organizations.
And I appreciate that, and it's important to have that as part of the public record because, you know, quite literally it says material, but we're talking about things outside of a printed material. So thank you for that. Now, with regard to the amendment based on the state regulation that you helped usher through, can you elaborate as to the intention of that?
So the regulation was to kind of allow at least to give a framework for the counties to kind of go for, you know, to set an overall limit. I heard from you, from Montgomery County, and from, I guess, from the state and from Howard County, kind of the stakeholders there, as well as some of the advocate groups there. You know, what the intent was never to bar certain activities by participating in a publicly financed program here. And so, but at the same token, no one wanted to have it as a vehicle, like they didn't want to create vehicles to circumvent the intent, which is to create a program for small dollars, grassroots organization. And so it's kind of how to strike a compromise here to allow some activities to exist, you know, and allow you to participate with the central committees at forums or anything like that, to have that give and take, but at the same token, not have it so that you can, like I said, basically run a campaign from this. Additionally, with the idea of that it has to derive from contributions from legally permissible sources, is so that the perception wouldn't be, and I'm not saying that this is going to occur or has occurred, but you don't want to have a publicly financed candidate that says, I can only raise $250 from individuals, and then say to that same individual, but you can give $6,000 to the central committee, your businesses can give $6,000 to the central committee, creating almost like a major loophole there then to funnel campaign finances back. We see that a lot on the federal level, where you see presidential candidates, you know, raise into their pot for their campaign, and then they basically direct people over to the super PAC that exists with unlimited money, and then you kind of have that kind of, you know, I would say circumvention that goes on here. So it was kind of to keep the intent of the program, to allow for some flexibility, and to, you know, not hamper campaigns from engaging in or being a part of their political party. So that's kind of, from what I gathered, was like $10,000 was kind of a good overall number for it to exist. But I didn't want to go into it and say each individual county or to have some sort of limits. If Montgomery wants to go below $10,000, that's within their right. If Howard wants to do that, or if, you know, as the counties, you know your own rules better than I do, and what it costs to run an election there. I was just looking at it on a macro level going, okay, I know at $10,000, you're not going to be doing like a ton of activity.
Thank you for elaborating on that. You know, it's in the packet, and during public testimony, someone had suggested that rather than have it defined by a dollar amount, it should be delineated based on an activity. I see both sides, but I think ultimately, if you were to have a list of activities, there would be one or two or others that would be left off, right? And we'd have to revisit this. So I think having that $10,000 allows for the latitude without creating a loophole that someone could drive through, thereby disregarding the intention of the law. So I think you've struck a good balance here.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you so much. Okay, any other thoughts or comments regarding this particular piece, this proposed amendment that Ms. Wellens has mentioned? Ms. Wellens, can you describe again the language so that we know what we are adopting?
Absolutely. Just unmuting here. So the language, again, this is after Circle 19 of the council staff report. And the specific additions are that, well, first of all, I should mention this language does have a couple of non-substantive clarifying points that were raised by the county attorney's office. And basically what it does is to clarify that the $10,000 limit applies to each entity, so that it would be $10,000 for the state committee and $10,000 for the Montgomery County Committee. It would not be $10,000 total, if that makes sense. And then the other clarification was just that the $10,000 limitation applies per election cycle. So those clarifications are included here. And then in addition, specific to Mr. Demaris's point, if you go to page 2 of the addendum, you can see the language that would limit the in-kind contributions to the permissible sources. Specifically, it's broken out by, there's a subsection 1 and subsection 2. So let me read that for you. An applicant, candidate, or a participating candidate may accept in-kind contributions from a state central committee of a political party if, and then it has the total amount of in-kind contributions from the central committee per election cycle are equal to or less than $10,000. And here's the new part to align with the state regulation: the funds used by the central committee to make an in-kind contribution derive from individual contributions that do not exceed the public contribution limits established under section 16-23. So that's linking back to the $250 limit per individual.
Mr. Demaris, just so that I'm clear, so that means that the central committees then so how is that going to be tracked, I guess is my question. So when the reports are drafted, et cetera, so the onus is on the central committees to show that in-kind contribution that they made to a particular candidate was funded by individuals and that they did not exceed the $250. Is that what I'm hearing?
So,
is that what I'm interpreting? Or if you could clarify how that would work.
No, I mean, it would be on the, yes, it would be on the onus, would be on the central committee at that point there to know their sources. I guess like I always said, that this is a self-regulated industry here, right? So publicly financed committees are going to then, show on their campaign finance report receipt of in-kind contributions because they have to report that activity. The central committees, every time, I'm not sure if you noticed, but there's a little question when you enter in expenditure information. Did this expenditure fund an in-kind contribution? And you check yes or no, and they would check yes, and then they would put the committee name in there. The report itself would then have a list of all their contributors that they've received money from. This is publicly displayed. Opponents and everything else, media, will all be looking at that, and then they'll be tallying up the numbers and going, let's see how many individuals they have, and to see if there's $250, and if it's on them to make sure that there's enough money to cover that. It doesn't have to be specifically raised or allocated for that. Like, they don't have to go out and saying we're raising X amount of dollars for so-and-so's campaign or anything like that. Right. They're just basically, as long as they have permissible sources in their pot, then they're allowed to make these expenditures here. This is very similar to the concept is like when you give money to federal candidates, right? Federal candidates can only accept from, specific types of sources. So if you give a check for like $900 to a federal candidate, you have to have $900 from individuals, because if your entire campaign was funded by corporations, that would be considered a pass-through or impermissible sources of funds for that federal campaign. So that's kind of the concept here, and it's worked on that. And like I said, if this is something that we can revisit, if this doesn't work or if it's proving too burdensome here, it's good to be in regs rather than in state law and with the county code. So, as we go through these iterations of public financing here. There's always room to tweak, and I know Mr. Crow and I will always sit down and kind of go through it and have a little bit of lesson learned and come out of these things. So, yes.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I wanted to make sure that, it was all spelled out, because I think that the awesome thing is that it aligns the spirit of the program also with, what central committees then should aspire to do, which is great. So, okay, for colleagues in the committee, any objection to that particular recommendation? Let's see.
No, I just have my hand up, and I was going to note the federal.
I saw how you did that, and then you went like this, and then you went like this.
Yeah, exactly. I was just going to note that it sounded very similar to that dynamic of, sufficiency of funds, as a standard. Thank you. And I think that this amendment, as drafted, is, solves the issue.
Awesome. Okay, without objection, I think that we can adopt this. I don't see Councilmember Katz on the screen, so I'll say without objections. Oh, there he is. Okay, cool. All right, we'll accept that that amendment, that recommendation. Okay, Ms. Wellens.
Thank you, Chair Navarro. So that concludes the action items, except for whether you want to recommend the bill as a whole for enactment for the full council. The issue number 2 is the only other issue that was noted in the staff packet, in the staff memorandum. And that one, as the chair already noted, simply brings up some issues that were identified in public testimony, including by Mr. Damaris, as sort of food for thought. I think that most of these items probably require additional research and consultation with stakeholders, but I did not want to overlook them in terms of, just bringing them to the committee's attention. So obviously you could discuss them more now to the extent that there's time and you wish to, or just simply note these for future items for consideration. Thanks.
Thank you. I suggest that we actually, schedule a work session later on, maybe even, I don't know, in the summer or something like that, to go a little bit deeper into this. Obviously, the limitation on individual contributions, we did revisit that when we did the amendment. I think that transitioning to public financing from traditional financing is an interesting concept that we should definitely, discuss. We did discuss that when we were deliberating on the bill, but maybe there could be some tweaks there. And then the decertification of public finance candidates, I think that definitely something that we should be thinking about as well in terms of strengthening it. But I think for the purposes of this bill and the scope of what was introduced, we should, we should leave that for an additional work session. And before we vote, I did want to ask Mr. Skoll if he had any comments or any reflections that he wanted to share with us. Really appreciate you being here and all the work that this particular body has engaged in. It's been very productive, and as I said, I think it's been an example for other jurisdictions. Mr. Skoll, if you want to add anything.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you again for the opportunity to be involved in this program. The committee wasn't asked to consider or take a position on this bill, so I can only speak as an individual and former candidate for offices to say it seems eminently reasonable. I hope it doesn't put too big a paperwork burden on the central committees, but it sounds like there's an intent to be flexible and reasonable, so sounds good to me.
Well, I'm glad that you're here, and I want to thank you again in the committee for all the work. I think it's been so important to have that component of a committee that is tasked with giving us the request of what they believe should be in the fund, because obviously having the money in the fund is the one piece that is the most important, the one component that obviously everybody evaluates before participating in the program. And but all these other pieces are important as well, and your feedback is always welcome. Okay, with that, again, before we vote, just again, thank you, Mr. Damaris, for everything that you've done. Mr. Crow, I do see the co-lead sponsors have their hands up, and let me go to Councilmember Reamer and then Council Vice President Glass before we take the vote to send it to the council. Councilmember Reamer.
Actually, I think the Vice President had his hand up first, and I'll defer to him.
Council Vice President Glass.
Thank you very much. Very courteous GO committee. I appreciate all of you. While not a member of the GO committee, I do want to raise an issue that has come to my attention since the introduction of this bill, because as you noted, Chair Navarro, the bill was very narrowly tailored to address an issue that had come up since you led the effort to reform and update the law. One thing that has come up, and I believe it was also mentioned in public testimony, is a prohibition that currently exists regarding candidates in publicly financed campaigns to use any funds to support central committees. And Mr. Demarinis was alluding to that in his comments throughout the morning about any loopholes or about parties generally funding publicly financed campaigns. But the practical reality of that prohibition has led to candidates in public financing not being able to attend party events because they can't afford a ticket. Whether the ticket is $50, $100, it prohibits candidates in public financing from purchasing tables, and quite frankly, it prohibits candidates in public financing from purchasing an ad in a brochure to support those efforts. And I think this is something that we need to address. I would actually prefer that we address it in this legislation, being a minor tweak before campaign season for any person wanting to participate in public financing before all that gets underway. But it does create two systems where people who are in public financing cannot participate in events because they can't afford it from their own personal pocketbook. And a large part of public financing was to level the playing field for those from communities that don't have personal wealth or don't have connections to wealthy donors. And so I raise that to the committee's attention because I think it is imperative that we address this.
I wish that we had had a heads up, though, because I know Ms. Welling worked really hard on this packet. I tend to agree with you because as somebody who participated in it last time, I had to pay with my own money to participate. So I do know that it creates a particular barrier. It's just that, again, this was not, I don't know if Ms. Welling has any feedback on that since she's the analyst, but let me turn to Mr. Demarinis and then Councilmember Reamer. And then
Councilmember Glass, I just wanted to, that's an issue that cannot be handled at the county level. I think that the state law is quite clear in the enabling legislation here in 13505 B5. It says it shall prohibit a candidate who accepts public campaign financing from transferring funds from the campaign finance entity established to finance the campaign for county elected office to any other campaign finance entity. So transferring funds would be monetary, which is why in-kind is fine here. And so I think that prohibition is at the state level with the enabling legislation. And it would be something that I think whether this session or for, future sessions can be addressed to carve out, say, an exemption for central committees and the idea that you can transfer funds to the central committee, but that's got to be handled at that level.
Well, glad you're here. Thank you for clarifying that. And as we know, this is an evolutionary process, and so we'll continue refining, and we'll talk with our delegation about doing that either this year or next year. But thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Demarinis, for that clarification. I think that we could definitely work with our General Assembly partners, and maybe there could be a limitation, some sort of a monetary limit or something like that. So it's not like some crazy thing, but I think it is definitely an issue. As I said, I had to deal with it myself. And those who participate in public campaign finance had to do it too. So I totally understand that. All right, Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you so much. Great. Well, I wanted to just ask Mr. Demarinis and Mr. Skoll and Ms. Boucher, who I think is with us. There's an issue that's highlighted in the packet, and there are some solutions that may need deeper legislative work, but there are some that could be acted upon by executive regulations that actually are overdue, I think, that should have been crafted already and sent to us and could be. And that was kind of highlighted in the packet, which is, this general issue that has sort of come up and maybe was only vaguely anticipated, that a candidate might be able to essentially use both systems in one election cycle, raise and spend considerable funding, from sources that are prohibited in the public system, raise and spend from those sources in the private system, and then close that account and open up a public account, and then, effectively run for office with the benefit of both those prohibited private sources and public taxpayer funds. And I just wanted to, ask Mr. Demarinis to raise this concern in some comments that he sent for the public record. And I wanted to just ask what he might, clarification he might think is helpful. And perhaps there's a way of, receiving some regulation from the executive branch in a timely manner. But I want to just sort of go back to the question of recognizing that public support for public finance is fragile, and we want to make sure that we are protecting the integrity of the system. And it would be I think that's our duty, and we ought to make sure that we can uphold that. So for Mr. Demarinis, if you could just perhaps expand on your comment for the public record that you made about concerns about potentially gaming the system and things like that.
Sure. I think that I guess anytime when it's a little bit vague in that area of you can't spend money or do certain activities, it creates some confusion, and with the candidates, with the general public, and with other stakeholders trying to understand the system. So anytime clarity and delineating very certain activities at a regulatory level, or what these terms mean, is paramount. I know that we have. I talked to the council over at Montgomery County when we try to parse some of these terms that are a little bit open-ended to see, and we try to go with the intent of what the law and the rules are for the program. So I just think that in this case here, because it's one of those issues that basically will occur in the future. It's you're always going to have a candidate that either goes traditional and then decides that they've had enough and they want to go to public financing, or they go back and forth and everything else. But you want to make sure that there are some clear guidelines and posts there. And it ties in with my other comment too, which was just kind of like the ability for any sort of, I would say, violations or that would necessarily, basically throw a person out of the program. So if a person, had spent money from a campaign account that should have been dormant or something like that, or prepaid for something, would that be a violation that would, the commission or someone would say, oh, that's a bridge too far. You have to repay it, and now you're out of the program because you have violated the spirit and intent of the program here. Kind of like a 7 deadly sins type of concept as well. So I think anytime it just brings clarity to the situation here, and it helps candidates make decisions whether to engage in this process or not. And rather than constantly having calls and doing frequently asked questions, I just think that it's, it helps overall with the program.
I mean, certainly there is we want folks to use the public system, and we want a candidate who might be in the private system to consider the years ahead in a term, and then decide to shift into the public system rather than to raise funds from the kinds of sources that we're trying to get out of politics. So in general, we encourage people to come to the public system, but as you said, there's sort of a spirit of the law, which is we aren't, we don't want folks to use both intentionally. That isn't. So is it true that a candidate could legally raise hundreds of thousands of dollars in large PAC contributions or corporate donations and spend those funds and then transition to the public finance system in the campaign and qualify and then receive public funds, which are intended really for candidates that haven't used funding from PAC and corporate sources?
I guess I can answer that question, but I'm not sure if it was best answered by counsel on that one there, but for your counsel. But my understanding of the code is that if you're in a traditional public finance, traditional campaign finance program, normally you can raise and spend your money. And then when you want to file your notice of intent to participate in the program, that activity for your traditional campaign account would be frozen, and you can no longer spend any money. You couldn't prepay for like TV ads or mail pieces to be distributed later on or published later on. But at that point there is no, I guess, amount or I would say that the traditional campaign account is limited by in its expenditures. So, but just when they file the notice of intent, that activity ceases, and then they go into the new program. But yes, that's kind of my understanding of the activities.
So are there certain, and perhaps I could address this to council staff as well, but are there certain expenditures, can a candidate prepay staff or rent, or can they buy media time and then transfer that from a private campaign to the publicly financed campaign? Can they pay for polling and then have that polling available to them?
Yeah. Can I just, as chair, I just want to interject here real quickly, because one of the reasons why I said at the very beginning that I definitely wanted to acknowledge these issues, but wanted to come back for a full-blown conversation was because when we deliberated on these pieces, and I distinctly remember Councilmember Katz' line of questioning about this, the fact that you might have a candidate who had a traditional account and then decides, I'm going to run for re-election, I want to go into public campaign finance. But maybe they had a website, or maybe they had, some specific things. And so it was the idea that you were then going to have to shut all that down and then start from zero, which seemed like a total waste of money. And therefore, the law did, the bill that we passed identified those things that you could, continue on, that you didn't have to shut down your website and then, open a new one, et cetera.
But that's where we need the regulation.
And so that is going to be really important. And if,
yes.
That's what everybody seems to have been following. So
you.
if we do need the regulation, I think that is very important, Councilman Reader.
Thank you.
The other piece that I was going to bring up was the fact that, again, having participated in this, and you have as well, it's not easy to qualify, right? It is not so easy to say, I'm going to do traditional, have all this money that's coming from everywhere, and then boom, now I'm going to shift midway. That was, I think, the purpose of the threshold, I think, has been so important because you really do need to go out there and get those individual contributions. It's not meant to be that easy to do the switch. But I do think that it's critical, Councilor Reamer, to have that conversation and understand whether the regulations reflect that. If, is it clear as it becomes more popular? I would agree that needs to happen. And so just kind of want to interject that, but I think that it would be good for Ms. Boucher to answer your question about the issue around, you had asked something about the regulations.
Yeah. To your point,
here, so it can be clear.
Councilmember Reamer, would you mind clarifying your question about the regulations?
As Chair Navarro just explained, there is a part of the law, and I can really ask Mr. Demarinis, because he raised this, he essentially made a request for further clarification in his public testimony to us. So, maybe I'll just ask Mr. Demarinis if he would care to explain his comment to the council.
Sure. I guess there is a part where it says the campaign accounts cannot prepay for certain activities prior to, once you sign a notice of intent. So this is just kind of like the transition from traditional into public financing, and the fact that certain activities cannot be prepaid. And I remember the council debating this, because this was a very difficult topic, because they were like, well, I've already put website production already to create my website, and now it's in the operations and maintenance portion of it. So why do I have to now move that back and create a new website, or I have to buy a new URL, like to start like from a campaign from zero? And so this was as the chair said, I mean, this was deliberated and thought through, and it was to kind of prevent the idea of what Councilperson Reamer was talking about, which was the idea of prepaying for, I'm going to whittle down my money to zero by buying ads a week before the primary or a week before the general election here. But it was just kind of a line in there. And I think that that needs to just be flushed out, as you can see here, because there are issues that come up, and potentially between it causes, I guess, consternation among candidates and a little bit of worry about what can go on. So by having clear delineated rules and regulations, that could probably ease the fears, as well as some sort of enforcement mechanism there, so that if there's a violation, that the people will know that these are serious penalties, rather than saying something of like a curing nature, which is, you made a mistake, you owe us some money, or you owe the campaign some money, but you'll still be able to move on, into the program. So that's kind of the genesis of my comment.
So there's, Ms. Boucher, there's a regulation that has been needed since the law was passed, and we would benefit from, I think candidates would benefit from having that clarity. Mr. Demarinis, who has to implement our law, would benefit from having that clarity. And thank you. I don't know if Mr. Skoll had any comment, but I just wanted to express again, I think the spirit of the law here should be our guide, which is that a candidate should run in one system or the other, and not both. And that there is a loophole here, essentially. And I'm very concerned about the possibility that a future candidate might seek to game the system and get the benefit of raising PAC money and corporate money and large thousands of dollars donations from individuals, and then move into the public system and claim taxpayer funds, which are intended to support candidates who forego those sources and would be elected without having had the influence of contributions from those sources. And that's what we were trying to create, was that freedom for candidates to be independent from those influences and those sources of funding. And there is a reasonable line here where someone can make a good faith shift, and then there is an exploitation of the system or a gaming of the system. And we do need some clarification to ensure that this law is strong in the future. Or if the system is gamed and exploited, then public support will fade, and people will say, why should the county spend millions of dollars supporting this system that's funding that could be used for schools and parks and climate action. And obviously the system's not helping anything. So I just think this is a matter of really vital importance. Mr. Skoll, if you have any comment, and then I'll cede my back to the chair.
It's not a matter the committee considered or is technically within our jurisdiction, but council has obviously been wrestling since the program began with how do the publicly and privately financed candidates, how do the campaigns relate? New York City for 8 cycles allowed unlimited private contributions in addition to participation in the public program. And they have upped the matching amount, and it has worked a great change in who make up the city council in New York. Previously 17 women and now a majority of women. So the public financing program is very successful there as here. I asked Phil Andrews if he recalled any discussion of this back when the bill was originally passed. Many of you were there and would remember it well. He thought it was a question that was left unanswered, and it sounds like it should be addressed.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you so much. So we absolutely, this committee is, as we have already shown, it's very interested in continuing to strengthen this groundbreaking program. First one that has been this comprehensively proposed in terms of local jurisdictions and within the state. And of course, when you do something like this, you're going to constantly look at ways to improve. So I think that as I stated earlier, Ms. Wellens, we absolutely, should look at having a subsequent session to go deeper into this piece, and also get an understanding of whether this is something that, given now that we have at least one cycle, whether this has been a problem, and whether it needs to be further clarified through regulation, because as I said earlier, we did have a very lengthy discussion about that particular piece, simply because it's also confusing, right? Like, you just don't know. I mean, if you had things like a website or something of that nature, you don't want to run afoul of the law either. You want to make sure that you're doing the right thing. But some of these type of administrative things that are ongoing, it just didn't make sense to have to, start from zero necessarily. That can also be construed as a burden that would dissuade people from participating. And so there is this fine balance that we have to strike with this program to make it viable for everyone. And but in my opinion, this really requires a much lengthier work session to just flesh everything out and see. All right. So with that, I do believe that we have a recommendation to adopt this bill as amended in order to send it to full council. Any final thoughts from my GO colleagues? Without objection, we will recommend to full council adoption of the bill as amended. Thank you so much, everyone. Really appreciate it. And thank you again, Council Vice President Glass, for this really important clarification. And we should probably, Council Vice President Glass, maybe draft a letter or something like that to let our General Assembly partners know that perhaps this is something they should be looking into as well to round out the entire issue. And thank you, Councilmember Reamer, for spending time with us, and Mr. Marinas, Mr. Skoll, Mr. Crow, Ms. Wells.
Madam Chair, may I ask one question?
Who is this? I'm sorry.
This is Kathleen Boucher. I apologize. Let me turn my.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead. Sorry, I didn't see you.
If I may just ask one question, and then I can take it offline with Mr. Marinas to the extent that I need to, and council staff. But when I was hearing Mr. Demarinis respond to Mr. Reamer's question, I couldn't tell whether Mr. Demarinis was saying this was an issue of local law that could be clarified at the council level, or whether there was a need for state regulations.
This is a local. This is
Right.
your bill.
Right.
Local
So I
regulation,
just want-
not law though,
Yeah.
like regulation, right?
Well, I guess it's a local issue, whether it's through your code or through regulation. But it's the state is out of that. That's
Christine identified it as a regulation to implement the law.
Right, under section, if I may, to interrupt, but yes, under section 16-24, Ms. Boucher, is of the county code is where this issue is addressed and where it's contemplated that the specific permissible prepaid, the permissible prepayments would be specified by executive regulation. So yes, you're correct, and not state regulation, but county executive regulation.
Yep. So we should be able to address that in a subsequent session because it is up to us. So
Thank you for the opportunity to clarify.
Is that clear? Okay, thank you.
Just to clarify, it sounded like there was two distinct issues. One issue was what Council Vice President Glass raised, which is the question of tickets to a party function currently prohibited under state law. That's what requires, I thought, Madam Chair, a letter to the
But that's
state
not what Councilmember Reamer brought up. That's
Councilmember
right.
Reamer was a separate line of questioning, which is the issue that has been raised previously and was noted, which is about this question of transitioning from a traditional account to a public account and how that process works, and that is a local regulatory issues. I just wanted to make, because I'm confused, I want to make sure that's how I understood it.
I'm not confused. I know that Vice President Glass brought up an issue that is really important, but that is at the state level, which is why we said that we should try to send a letter. But what Councilmember Reamer brought up is a regulation issue that we could address here in the county. So we can quickly, I think, work on that in a subsequent session because that is under a purview. So we will definitely work on that, Ms. Wellens, and make sure Councilmember Reamer knows so we can come together. That is what we discussed. I think it's clear, but hey, you never know.
Apologize. I just want to make sure staff and
good.
With the follow-up from staff was what we were intending.
No, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so without objection, then that is the recommendation of the GO committee to adopt with amendments. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for being here today. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, committee.
Nos está diciendo de